when you start excavating that darkness from yourself and working through it, it's remarkable how everything around you begins to reflect that. It really does, especially with you when you work with as many people as I've worked with, like you start to believe in magic because you see these seemingly unrelated things. What does Simba coming back have to do with the rain and the plants, right? No relation, but it really does work that way in real life. All of a sudden you get a promotion and your wife, ends up, something wonderful happens to her and your kids start flourishing. And then all of a sudden you get money you weren't expecting. It's really wild and I've just seen this over and over and over again.
Welcome to the Well Worshipped Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationship, and build a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Thanks, baby. Before we dive in today, make sure that you follow the show. If you've been listening to a few episodes, leave us a review and share it with somebody in your life. It helps this message reach farther and wider. Today on the podcast, we have Matt Enns. Matt Enns is a transformational men's coach, creator of the Archetypal Integration and Depth Coaching System, and founder of Sovereign Man Coaching Company. He specializes in helping men save their marriage from the brink of divorce, even when their wife says it's over, and has several additional coaching programs focused on masculine self-development. Matt Enns, welcome to the show.
Thank you both for having me very much.
Yeah, we're stoked to have you on and to dive into this conversation today about how men can really build a kingdom that feels like them, and also about how archetypal energies play into that. But before we dive in, Matt, what's the earliest context that we need to know about you to understand what got you onto this path?
Yeah. You could kind of pick a lot of different dates and start telling the story from there. But most directly, um, my personal life and my marriage had deteriorated to quite a degree by my late 20s. I'm 38 now. And it just brought me to a crux in my life where I knew something needed to change. I don't use the term alcoholic, even though by any possible metric I was. I was drunk every day for a decade. And I mean, 1 or 2 days off a year, maybe. End up getting separated from my wife. I had extreme social anxiety. Um, Basically, aside from my career, and I was a financial advisor at the time, nothing was really going well. And I started working on myself and figuring out, what I went wrong, why I had taken the path in life that I had, why I had the emotional reactions that I had, the emotional volatility, depression, anxiety, etc. And as I slowly rebuilt myself and eventually, um, figured out what was actually working because I'd been to all the therapists and everything and nothing had really helped. When I found what actually worked and then I figured out how to fix my marriage, even though therapists had told us it was over, um, I felt a real calling that I had to share this. And so I ended up saying no to growing my business. I had a contract in front of me to expand my business. Said no to that, sold my business, and then we moved from Canada to Texas and started Sovereign Man. And so as an introvert in my mid-30s, I went on Instagram and started talking about all this stuff, even though everybody I knew my life was a mess for a very long time. But yeah, that's kind of what led to the formation of Sovereign Man.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm listening to your story, and I think that this part of, I tried therapy and it didn't work, or therapist told us that, it was the end, couples therapy was unsuccessful, but then I found what did work. And so I'm wondering what the first stuff you started to explore, what the first maybe tools you started to integrate that was really like, oh, this is impacting my life differently than maybe what everyone else had told us to try, or the strategies that we had tried earlier that allowed some opening to start?
Yeah, great question. In my work since with, hundreds and hundreds of men, like it's such a repeatable pattern that they go to therapy and it doesn't work, or they'll go to therapy for like one session and the 24-year-old therapist will say, yeah, it looks like you guys aren't meant to be together. You should probably try a trial separation. Infuriating to me. So yeah, really common. Basically there was two things that I figured out. One was I have way more power in the relationship than I realized. And then number two was I've been sold a lie about how men and women are meant to relate to each other in a marriage, and that she was so radically different than me that me treating her in the way I would treat a man and expecting the same response that I would get out of a man was idiotic and ineffective. But because of the kind of political paradigm, I guess you can't, a lot of therapists don't want to talk about something as obvious as the difference between men and women. And so you're kind of starting on a shaky foundation because you can't even say like, hey, she's very different and she's going to respond very differently to you. So they kind of talk to you both in the same way, give you both the same advice, and it just doesn't work. So those are the two things. I have way more power to change this by changing myself than I realized. And she's way different from me. And I have to actually understand her if I want to relate to her.
Yeah, that realization of your personal power in the relationship is the seeds of the kingdom, which is something you talk about creating and something that you've created now. And so before we kind of build a bridge for the audience from that moment of opening, of recognizing your personal power, at least tasting it, before we build that bridge from then until now, can you just paint us a picture of what your kingdom looks like today? What have you built and why do you call it a kingdom?
Yeah. So the first part of my kingdom is me. And what I've built there is I've really transformed who I am on, on a physical level, a spiritual level, a psychological level. Um, I look different. If you see, I posted some pictures today on my Instagram of me, and I was like clean cut, short hair, financial advisor. I was about 30 pounds of muscle lighter. Um, I was anxious, like I said. And so, yeah, I feel like a very much new person. I'm emotionally, very calm and very resilient and much tougher to flap than I used to be. Um, And then next would be family. I've got a beautiful wife, Whitney. We've been together for been married for 14 years. We've got a 12 and a half year old son. We've got an 8-year-old daughter. Um, and yeah, we love spending time together. Like I told you guys before we started, we're about to go on a road trip to Florida. And we could fly, but we like spending time together. So we're going to do the like 20-hour drive together just because we love it. And then I've got the business, which right now we've got, depends on how you slice it, but call it 500 active clients, team of coaches. Yeah, we help men who are on the brink of divorce try to save their relationship by doing what I just described, right? Number one, working on themselves. Number two, understanding and relating to her. So that's, and we got a puppy about 4 months ago. So that's the newest addition to the kingdom.
The bridge to get from where you were to where you are and, like, learning what it really means to be the sovereign man or to I was listening to a podcast actually that you were on, and you were creating this picture of, the Lion King and the archetype of the king, and, if the wrong king is in charge, then it looks like Pride Rock when Scar is there versus when Simba comes back, and I loved that picture, and so this shift that you had maybe from where your house was to now, what is the internal shift that results, I guess, from claiming like, "Oh, I have a lot more power than I thought." Where do you start executing that power or feeling that power to start changing things?
Yeah, I think it's different to some degree for every individual and for men and women, but my standard advice to men is the best place to start is by looking at the things you're hiding from yourself. And that's exceptionally difficult to do because by definition, you know, whatever layers of deceit you've built up to hide it, they're specifically designed to trick you, right? So it can be very helpful to have a wife because she will have a very clear idea of your flaws and the things you're hiding from yourself. So you can check in with your wife, but you got to do that work yourself. And it can be as simple as just taking out a pen and paper and writing down, where am I full of shit? And in my case, um, I was very concerned with people thinking that I was what I wanted to be, right? So I needed them to think that I was really nice and caring and also really confident and really smart and really cool and really smooth. Um, and I wasn't a lot of those things to a great degree. And I had to admit that I'm not always a very good friend and that I'm not showing up fully as a father and that I maybe I don't tell outright lies because I've always been a reasonably honest person, but I could use the truth to create deception pretty well, and I could, lies of omission. So I'm not as honest as I thought. And when you really get honest with yourself like that, it begins a process of healing where you can actually construct something that you're fully aware of, that's fully integrated, that you're fully conscious of. Um, a quote I beat to death all the time from Carl Jung is, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. And what he basically means is those things that you hide from yourself or that you're unaware of, they're making decisions for you. They're planning your future for you. They're relating to your wife for you. And if you're unaware of them, these patterns are going to keep playing out and you're just think, oh, I'm fated, like, oh, another marriage that didn't work out. I picked the wrong ones. And it's like, well, no, there's some part of you that's driving that forward and repeating that pattern. And you think it's fate, but you're just not aware of that pattern. So you have to make those patterns conscious. And it's really hard to do, again, because it's all the things that you don't want to admit about yourself that you learned from mom or from dad or from bullies or from friends, that these things make you less attractive socially. These things make you feel unsafe, make you feel insecure. And so you learn to hide them all. And so much of you becomes unconscious that you're no longer in control of your own life and you end up in a place that you wouldn't choose to end up. So that process of becoming conscious is, flipping over all those rocks in the depths of your mind and saying, what's actually under there. And if you don't feel like you got punched in the gut at the end of that process, then you didn't do it properly. Yeah, so that's where I'd always start, is like, just dive straight into the pain, and see what you can learn from it, because everything will get worse for a while when you do that. It's not like everything gets better right away. They call it, psychologically, that's called, or alchemically, that's called the blackening, right? Like, things get worse. But unless you do that, you can't get to the whitening when things get lighter and better and nicer. So yeah, I say dive right in and be ruthlessly honest with yourself. Because that gives you a real foundation. You can build your house on rock when you've done that.
We had a conversation when we first started doing this work together about if you're lucky, you understand that part of your role as the masculine in the relationship is protection, but the miss is that we've forgotten that we need to protect, like, part of his role as protector is to protect me from himself, from his own shadows, and, like, really understanding that, um, there the most hurt happens within the relationship. If a random person hurts me, then I'm like, "Oh, like, that sucks," you know? But if I'm hurt within the context of our relationship, that really, really cuts deep because it's the person that I love the most. And so this exercise that you're suggesting is so powerful because it then makes you aware, or makes the man in the room aware of, like, where am I actually the cause of the dissonance in my partnership? Where am I sort of failing at my role of protecting my beloved from these shadows that I hold, instead of just worrying about what's outside of us?
Yeah, very, very well said. And that goes back to that Lion King analogy that I use in that podcast, I guess. Like, there's a reason we can watch a movie like that, and as soon as Simba comes back and replaces Scar, the clouds part and the plants start growing again, and the animals all return, and everyone's galloping and frolicking and happy again. The reason why I watch that and it doesn't seem stupid is because that is really how life works. And when you start excavating that darkness from yourself and working through it, it's remarkable how everything around you begins to reflect that. And it really does, especially with you when you work with as many people as I've worked with, like, you start to believe in magic because you see these seemingly unrelated things, right? Okay, what does Simba coming back have to do with the rain and the plants, right? No relation, but it really does work that way in real life. All of a sudden you get a promotion and your wife, ends up, something wonderful happens to her and your kids start flourishing. And then all of a sudden you get money you weren't expecting. It's really wild to do. And I've just seen this over and over and over again. Yeah, when you really understand who you are and the capacity you have for violence, for damage, for anger, for resentment, you can actually protect the people around you from that. But if you don't, the extreme example is like the really nice postal worker who everybody says is great, and then one day goes into the office and shoots everybody, right? It's like he had no conscious relationship with the darkness inside of him. And then, one day, like, it takes over. And that can happen, hopefully, in much smaller ways all the time in your relationship, right? We're also like, well, why would I treat my wife that way? Like, I don't even mean the things I said. It's like, where did that come from? It's like, well, your duty as a man, as the king of your kingdom, is to figure out where that came from, because if you don't, it will keep happening. So I don't feel like that was a one-to-one comment on what you said, but I lost myself halfway through.
Yeah. Yeah, as we continue to pull on this thread of how do we build our kingdoms as men, it's very clear in this conversation that it begins with the self. And that's the first thing that you said. You went self, family, business. It starts with the self. And the fear among men is that if I begin this inner work, I will lose my edge. I won't be able to perform at the level that I have been. I won't be able to uphold this image that I've been projecting to the world. And what you've shared is, yeah, maybe there's this
Mhm.
period of the blackening where you might feel weaker. You might cry more often. Things might feel harder. And so you believe in magic because you've seen the other side of it. I've seen it too. But for a guy who just sees this looming specter of the blackening and no belief in the reward that's on the other side, how does that guy get started? How can we possibly get over that hump?
Yeah, so there's two ways. One is with humility and wisdom, voluntarily on your own terms. The other way is to wait until your life crashes down around you in the form of separation, divorce, bankruptcy, cancer. And as much as I love men, we're slow learners. Like, the vast majority of us wait until life forces us to do that, right? So probably the most practical answer is, when you get an opportunity at rock bottom to do this work, I suggest you take it. Because if you don't, God will give you more opportunities in the future to do this work. And um, I don't want another opportunity to do the work that I did 10 years ago. So I try to stay very conscious of things that are beginning to go off the rails in my life, because I know if they don't, and everything fully goes off the rails and crashes, it's going to be a much harder lesson than I want to learn. So, um, yeah, even if your life is pretty good right now, I say, hey, figure out the snakes that are hiding somewhere in the back of your mind, because they are there and they're growing, and you don't want to wait until they're dragons before you face them.
Those recorrections, those lessons become harder the longer we allow stuff to spin off the rails, or the more snakes we allow to grow in our minds. And you mentioned that one way guys can come to this path is through humility and wisdom and just getting ahead of it, right? And one of the fruits of the work is that, let's say there's a divorce or a bankruptcy or a breakup, and you do it once, you are so much less prone to allow things to get as out of hand as they were before. You are a much more devoted gardener, tender to your inner garden, and you pull the weeds earlier. And so as you build this kingdom, right, and weeds start to grow, I guess dial it back one step. How do you, or how does a man develop the sensitivity to understand earlier on when there's weeds growing or when things are off the rails, and have the proactivity to nip it?
Yeah. Um, I think it kind of goes back to what we've been talking about so far. It's like, look at the weeds that are already there. Um, because if you spend enough time pulling up weeds and you realize how difficult it is to pull them up, and how much time it takes, and how much time it takes away from other things you'd rather be doing, and how crappy and how dark it feels, when you see a weed sprouting, you're much more likely to go, oh, I'm just going to grab that one, instead of waiting until it's got its roots spread throughout the whole garden, right? And I think that's just reality for most of us. That's how we're going to learn, is by just experiencing the pain of past decisions. Because that's where I really went wrong my whole life until I was like 30. Um, I tried very hard not to learn any lessons, and obviously that wasn't what I was doing on purpose. But you know, say I get drunk and I make a fool of myself, rather than like really analyzing what went wrong and what I said and how I damaged the relationship and what I should do to call that person up to make it better, I'd be like, oh, well, another wild one. And then I just count the hours till I can start drinking again that next night. Right. And the way that the universe works, in my opinion, and I think this is like a natural law because I've just seen it so many times, is the louder God has to yell at you to get your attention, like the louder he will. And so I just kept getting worse and worse opportunities to learn that lesson. And I had to try harder and harder to ignore them. And then things just got so bad that I was like, okay, what if I actually decided to take a look at what went wrong? And what if I decided to take a look at my role instead of saying, oh, well, it's not that big a deal, or it was really this person's fault, or, whatever excuse I gave myself was like, well, what if all of it was theoretically my fault? What if theoretically, and this is obviously true, but what if theoretically I was at the center of my life and I actually had some ability to direct how my life went? It's like, well, through that lens, it's like, that's a terrifying lens to look through, because it's like, if you look through that lens, everything is your fault. And you can look back and be like, oh, yeah, well, this person was way crazier than me, way crueler than me, way more malicious than me. But I very much played a role at bringing that person into my life and antagonizing them. Right. Or this was just like a freak accident. It's like, yeah, well, it was a freak accident, but I wasn't wearing my seatbelt.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you start looking back and you go, oh, man, like I actually have not infinite, but I have a huge degree of control over the direction of my life and the relationships that I have and how well things are going. And when what I did is I took 18 months, and I was, I've been a lifelong insomniac until the last few years. I was taking really heavy doses of indica cannabis to sleep. And when you ask yourself, like, what was my role in this thing going wrong, when you're on, 30, 40 milligrams of edible marijuana, like, you're going to get an answer and you're not going to like it. And you're not going to be able to stop thinking about it until you resolve it. Right. So I spent 18 months, like 2, 3 hours a day, just like laying in bed, terrified with my eyes open, like reflecting on how badly I had fucked up my whole life. And it was the best thing I could have ever possibly done, because I stopped hiding from memories and I started looking at them as kind of painful friends. And then everything started shifting, everything started getting better, and the anxiety started going down, the decisions started getting better, because I was being honest about the consequences, and I was being honest about the pain, and I was really reflecting on, like, oh yeah, it's really hard to pull this weed up. And when you experience that pain and you learn that lesson thoroughly, you don't want to let those weeds grow. And what I found is, like, I still let weeds grow, but over time they they grow less before I address them, right? And I want to get to the point where, the millisecond they appear, I'm yanking them out. But I'm not waiting for them to be 10 feet tall anymore, right? I'm maybe waiting for them to be 6 inches tall before I pull them in. Like, that's the journey. And hopefully in a few years from now, they're 4 inches tall before I pull them out.
I am curious about, since you specifically are working with men that maybe are trying to salvage a relationship. When I work with whoever I'm working with, I tell them what I'm focused on is you feeling more like you, and then there will be an outcome, and either that outcome will be that the relationship is better or you find out that it wasn't for you. But I'm working at a little bit of a different intention than where you guys are working, and obviously from a different lens because I'm a woman. But I always have trouble walking this line of like, okay, I've seen this like a million times before, and this is probably the way that it's gonna go. And you could just listen to the messages that are being sent, or, I'm here for you however this plays out. Like, you could listen to them now, or 10 repetitions down the road, you could listen to it. And so when you're working with men in their relationships and trying to salvage it, I'm wondering, like, if there is teachings that you work with about, how the relationship itself feels in their own body, like that maybe they actually are in relationships that the weed that grew was way before they even proposed,
Mm.
and that it was like not actually something they should be in the first place, or if there is more of a focus on, okay, there's a commitment that's been made, so where can we address this now, or a little of both. I'm just curious about your approach in that realm.
Yeah. So my advice to every man that works with us is do everything you possibly can to save the relationship. And that's, in large part, that's because most of the clients we work with have kids. And I think the marriage ceases to be about you and her primarily and begins to be about the kids primarily. Now, there's obviously exceptions. We get, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of cases where the wives have like legitimate mental disorders. And so, there's certainly cases where we will step in and say, hey, look, like for your own mental health and to make sure you can be there for yourself and be there for your kids, like you need to get out of this. You're not ready to make that decision, but don't let the damage that she's doing get worse. But basically, aside from that, I would rather see them try to fight to keep a relationship that's ultimately not going to work out for 6 months longer than they should, rather than give up on it 6 months before they should, because they don't get to learn any lessons if they give up on it 6 months too soon. And if they wait 6 months too late, they get to look back and go, I tried everything I could. I have no regrets. I learned so much about who I am as a man, and I sure as hell know a whole lot more about who I'm going to pick next time.
Mm.
Um, but as part of that work, yeah, we start in childhood with everybody. I joke with all the guys inside the program, so I'm giving away a secret here, but I'm like, this is a like a men's self-development program disguised as a save your marriage program.
Mhm.
Half our content is, how to understand her, why she's afraid, how her emotional system works differently than yours, what she means when she says this, why it sounds like she means something else, why she says she wants one thing but then doesn't actually want that. And we explain this all in a way to guys will go, oh, I actually understand my wife for the first time. And that's like, but that's just information. It's pretty straightforward, right? Like once they get the information, they're like, oh, like it's mind blowing when they learn it because no one teaches us this stuff. I'm sure that'll be different going forward, but when we all grew up, none of us got taught this stuff. But the harder part, the more meaningful part, the part that actually matters is the transformation, right? The information is useful, but it's pretty straightforward. It's the transformation that's difficult. And yeah, we work with the guys right from their early childhood to figure out, when did you accept that this is the role that you play in relation to people that you love? When did you accept that you have to make somebody happy in order to feel safe? When did you accept that you have to kick and scream and yell and be angry in order to be heard? Because 99% of the time that predates the relationship by 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So yeah, we always start with that, because the other thing is, as much as, and I mean, this might sound like I'm, arrogant, whatever, but I really think this is true. Like the information we have about how to understand your wife and manage her emotional state and your emotional state, I think it's the best that's available anywhere. And it's incredibly useful, and it blows guys' minds all the time. It's so fun to watch, but I think that is almost unnecessary if they do the right work on themselves. And we see this over and over again with guys who only download the information and they don't do the transformation. Their relationship gets better for a time, or maybe gets to like be manageable but not wonderful. But the guys who go from like she's having an affair with somebody else and they're living in separate homes and they're back together and they're thrilled to be with each other, it's 100% of the time, always with no exceptions, because he did really, really deep work on himself. And I joke, like when you can manage your energy as a man, like she will feel the difference from the other room with the doors closed and the lights turned off. Like women have these magical intuitive black belts that they're all born with, and they can just tell, right? And when he walks into a room and he says the same thing he would have said yesterday, but he's got a different energy to him,
Mm.
everything in the relationship shifts. And that requires you actually do this internal work. So that's actually where we spend most of our time with our clients, because that's where you really move the needle. The tips and tricks and how to relate to a woman and how she's different, it's secondary in terms of importance.
Yeah, there's experiences that I've had in past relationships where I have shared, I'll follow you anywhere if only you know where you're going. Like my intuition knows where I'm going, and I can sense, to your point, of when there's instability in the field and I don't want to get on that ship. And so, in our relationship, Isaac will be like, okay, we're going this way into the grocery store or something. I'm like, okay, I'll follow you anywhere, because he's just so stable with everything that he is holding. And it's such a stark difference with other men that I've dated in the past, and I always knew it, like I was always encouraging the men that I was dating to go through these transformations and like get to this state where I knew I saw them, I can trust you, but not in these phases that you get into where like the wind is blowing so hard that you can't keep the foundation of the house solid. And so that transformation, I agree with you, is like it's not, there are no exceptions. It's really required to be able to access that state within yourself, and for everyone, but for men specifically, to notice when they are feeling unstable so that they can go do whatever they need to do to like
Correct.
get the house back in shape.
Yeah, that's so perceptive that you say that, because um, a lot of guys, we work a lot on emotional equanimity, right? Which is, people think of stoicism, right? Stoicism is acting calm in spite of how you're feeling. Emotional equanimity is actually being in a state of calm, even in the middle of a crisis or an emotional storm. And they kind of think that, well, if I do a good job of this, I'll always feel calm. And it's like, well, you can get better at it and you can get really, really good at it, but there's always going to be moments where it's too much. And it's your responsibility then to say, okay, I know if I continue in this conversation, I'm going to say something I regret. I'm going to get a tone. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to punch a hole through a wall, like whatever. Um, I love you. I want to finish this conversation, and I'm gonna make sure we do. But right now, I'm going on a walk, and don't follow me. Right. And a lot of guys think that that's rude, or, you can't let the sun go down in your anger. You have to resolve things. It's like, no, the worst, men are not at all aware of how unsafe we can make women feel, right? Because at a very base evolutionary biological level, pick a number, but we've got 50 pounds on you. We've got wider shoulders, bigger hands, denser bones. Like we're predators historically. That's what we are. And we've preyed on women a lot historically. And um, even if you grew up in an air conditioned condo with a great dad, like some part of your brain still knows, like, okay, this guy can switch into being unsafe pretty quickly. And it is your absolute duty and responsibility as a man to that your wife knows you have that in you, but that is only directed away from her, to protect her, to protect you, to protect your family. Because the moment it gets directed at her, and that can be like an angry, frustrated tone of voice, it's like, boom, she's aware, oh, I'm alone in the room with a predator. And you have to be so careful about that. And if you can feel that building in you, it's time to leave. Go for a walk, go for a drive, go to the gym, call your buddy, like whatever you got to do, but don't don't direct that energy at your wife, because it's very, very damaging.
One of the biggest lies everybody gets told, men and women, is that emotional health is having a regulated nervous system all of the time. And it creates this narrow window where only calm, only ease, only a monotone voice is acceptable. And so guys will fight to hold themselves within that, while there's they clench, they grimace, while there's all this anger operating up above, and there's all this dissatisfaction operating below. And we've talked about this already on this podcast. And then in an instant, he creates an unsafe environment for his woman. He punches a hole in the wall. He raises his voice. He blames. He slams the door, whatever it is. And so what we're really cluing into in this whole conversation is the ability to be safe within our own dysregulation, to not divorce from our anger and be like, no, baby, I actually never get angry. You're safe here. That's not safe to her. Subconsciously, she knows that's bullshit and that you do get angry. You might just not show it. And the longer that you hold it inside of you without addressing it, the more dangerous it becomes. So following the thread of like creating a kingdom, one, there's the self-work that needs to happen. And then there's creating safety first for your partner, and then for your family, your kids, if you choose to have one. So, following this thread of creating safety, creating security within your kingdom, what else is important there?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and this is kind of a separate pillar of all this. As a man, to have a vision for who you want to be, where you want to go. Because too many men, and again, I can speak from experience here, we kind of passively absorb a vision from the world around us when we're growing up, right? It's like, well, I guess I want to like be rich and have a nice car, and and especially on social media right now, it's like, well, I want to live in a castle and have a helicopter and 5 wives and 2 Bugattis. And it's like, well, that's not your vision. Like that's a vision you got off an adult child on Instagram. What's your vision for your life? And that takes time to figure out, right? You have to know what your values are. You have to know what your best character qualities are. And you have to know what impact you want to make in the world and what things really matter to you. Because, some people really value nature. Some people really value technology, right? Some people value security. Some people value freedom. Like, what matters to you, right? And then you have to build your life around that. Because if you don't have a vision for your life, you're going to bump into people constantly who do have a vision for their life. And since it's stronger than yours, you're going to end up being an extra in everybody else's movie rather than the main character in your own. And that's 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 men who live a life of quiet desperation, right? They're not actually in their life. Their life is just a bit role in the lives of the people around them. And that's not satisfying to a man. It doesn't have good hormonal effects on your body as a man. Like it's bad in every way. So you really have to take the time to go, okay, what do I want life to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now on my deathbed? And then reverse engineer who you have to be, what you have to accomplish, um, what you have to develop in order to get to that place. And most guys, again, they don't do that. And this is why guys wake up when they're 40, 45 years old and they go like, I don't even like my life. I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. And you know, I, I climbed to the top of the mountain. It turns out I don't like this mountain. Like, what do I do now? And so this is something you don't have to wait until you're in pain to do. I talked this through with my son already, and he's 12, and I've shared this with lots of people that I know who are, in their 20s or late teens. It's like, where would be an awesome place to end up? And the flip side of this is there's a lot of like manifestation stuff online, right? It's like follow your bliss and, just think happy, positive thoughts all the time. Well, that's part of being a human. The other part of being a human is that things can be really painful and shitty and suffering. And so if you want to fire an arrow into your future, you need tension at both ends of the bowstring, right? And one of those ends is a vision of heaven, and one of those ends is a vision of hell. And so when you're taking this time to say, where do I want to end up in 10 years? Take some time to say, where do I not want to end up in 10 years? Right? What if, I don't stop drinking? What if I keep getting angry at my wife? What if I keep ignoring my kids and playing Candy Crush on my phone? What if I continue to leave the office a little bit early whenever my manager isn't looking? It's like, oh, well, probably won't have a lot of money, might not even have a wife, my kids won't respect me, my health will be shit, my sleep will be shit. It's like, oh, and you play it out like, okay, and you can take out a pen and paper and do this like, okay, I wake up, I'm living in a shitty apartment alone. I'm not going to see my kids for another 2 weeks. And, I just got a bill that takes out all the money in my bank account. Like you actually visualize that in detail and feel that in your body. Like you don't have motivation, you're struggling with procrastination. Like spend some time with that vision. You will have motivation after that. And if you have the motivation of being, pushed away from hell and the motivation of being pulled toward heaven, like you won't have to struggle with motivation anymore. You'll start moving towards your vision without even consciously deciding to, because you're giving your subconscious mind the data, the specifics, the roadmap, and the emotional reality of what that potential future would feel like. And, then when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, your brain's working on how do I figure out, make sure we don't end up there and make sure we end up there. And then you wake up in the morning and instead of skipping the gym, you go to the gym because you've aligned your entire being toward that vision rather than different parts of you fighting in different directions.
There's so much great wisdom in what you just shared. There's on one end of the bowstring, what's the worst it could get? Almost every man I've met is afraid of some amorphous failure that they haven't even really met. They're afraid of failing. It's like, okay, what does that actually look like? Like, what is the floor for you? On one side of that, negative emotion is the primary motivation for change. So you get to feel that. And two, it's usually not death. It's usually not living on the streets. So there can be some relief from a really cloying fear of, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to die. It's like, actually, no, if you're lucky enough, you might move in with your parents or you might downsize. You might move to the middle of nowhere where it's more affordable. So there is a little bit of freedom from fear that happens there. And then on the other side of the bowstring, there is how good could it actually get? And you mentioned we've all inherited this playbook. Our vision usually starts as someone else's. It was the same for me. I was doing the cookie cutter playbook, 6-figure tech job. Let's buy a nice house. Let's get married. I was engaged at the time. Let's get a puppy, let's get a condo where we can see the water. And I had the same experience every other guy does who's lucky enough to have it. This isn't me. I just ran somebody else's playbook and I don't like the game that I'm playing. So for guys, it's also really helpful to notice, what playbook am I running? Is it like the bro scaler playbook that I saw on Instagram? Is it the playbook that my dad did? And maybe you're a fan of that playbook. Maybe you authentically are. But understanding that, like, is this me? And maybe doing that before you've spent a decade or 15 years running that playbook to perfection and winning a game that you never really cared about.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if we'd all had this realization when we were 20 instead of 30, or 25 instead of 45, right? Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a lot to add to that. I completely agree. It's a very scary thing to end up somewhere that you didn't plan on being and realize that the only reason you're there is because it never really occurred to you to ask yourself, is this what I want? Right? Well, I grew up poor, so I'm definitely not going to be poor. And then you spend all of your time and all of your energy and all of your effort accumulating money, and then you get there and you've been divorced twice and your kids don't talk to you and you're on your third heart attack. And it's like, wait, there's not a lot of me in my life. I never actually decided I wanted this. I was just running on unconscious fears, and now my life is half over. Like, and I work with guys like that, like, and the way that they describe it is like, I'm in hell. I'm in hell. And you don't want to be there. So take that time to, again, with humility, with wisdom, to voluntarily take a look at what hell might look like so that you can try your very best not to end up there.
And for guys who have done it, they spent a decade, multiple decades following that playbook and they've got there. They can have this sunk cost fallacy. If I spent all this time and energy getting here, I might as well just continue on this track. It's fine. It's okay. I've got it better than most. Hakuna Matata. No worries. This is who I am. This is what I built. And something that can be really helpful in breaking out of that fixed box is our archetypal energies. So I'm switching gears a little bit here, but I know that it's something you work with. So let's just start with a high level understanding of what are masculine archetypes and how can they be helpful for men to learn about and embody.
Yeah. So on a simple level, an archetype is just like a mental category, right? Like if you have an archetype of the tree in your head, you can see a species of tree you've never seen before and still recognize it's a tree because you have that category innately in your mind, right? And so, like, there's something like the archetype of a king. Um, you can grow up on an island with 15 people, and your mind knows what a king is, even if you've never heard of one or seen one. It's kind of innate to the human experience. Um, and a king might show up as a literal, like, medieval king. It might show up as a CEO. It might show up as a father. There's different expressions of that king, but the four primary masculine archetypes, which are defined in a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Douglas Gillette and Robert Moore. I guess I gave it away. The four are King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. So those are kind of the four fundamental archetypes that every man is working with, whether he's aware of it or not. And essentially what you want to do is express those archetypes in the healthiest, most balanced way. And kind of the way that I look at it is, and just to make it clear, that king is kind of obvious, right? But to be more specific, that's the part of your psyche that's capable of creating order, of being generative, meaning, growing things, creating fertility, right? A good king will grow his kingdom, grow his wealth, etc. It's also the part of you that can bless others, mentor others. The warrior is the part of you that wants to compete and challenge and fight and overcome and defend. The magician is the part of you that's introspective, strategic, likes to take ideas and turn them into reality, likes to have knowledge that other people don't, secret expertise. And then the lover is the part of you that's very embodied and wants to enjoy and play and experience sensual pleasure, not sexual pleasure, like the experience of the senses, right? How things smell and taste and touch and feel. Um, that's the lover. And they all have different shadow forms, right? So we won't go through all of them, but very simply, like if you have an overinflated king energy, you're going to turn into the tyrant king. And if you have a collapsed king energy, you're going to turn into the weakling king, right? So the tyrannical king creates order through selfishness and fear and dominating and controlling others. And the weakling king is unable to create order because he abdicates his responsibility, lets others make decisions for him, and doesn't step into his kingship in the way that he's meant to. And so if you can figure out, you know, who you are on an individual level, and I think it's most useful to look at magician, warrior, lover specifically. Like I would be much more magician dominant than lover dominant, right? Like if I have 5 hours to kill, I'm much more likely to read a book or listen to a podcast or try to learn something new than I am to spend 5 hours, trimming the rose bushes and enjoying how beautiful they are as a lover. But there's other men who are very lover dominant or very warrior dominant. And if you can kind of figure out your balance on a personality level of the magician, the warrior, and the lover, you create the conditions for the king archetype to emerge more easily. And so I do a lot of that work with clients because there's a whole literature on this, and it's a pretty specific process you can go through to figure out where you're dysregulated with the archetypes and then create that balance. And if you do that properly, you end up stepping into your power, your authority, your confidence. You have clarity in a totally new way.
Do you find that with archetypal work there is, like most men are kind of missing one or one is really suppressed or there's one where most of the shadows lie, and if they can nourish that one that's lacking, then everything comes back into balance? Or is it more like, this is where my strengths are, so this is where I should sit most of the time?
Um, Both are true, but in my experience, it's not necessarily that one is really underactive because you can have, and then again, this is not necessarily what Gillette and Moore would say. This is me speaking, but I believe you can have, the way that I look at it is you have like a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary, and from the magician, warrior, lover, and it's totally fine if you're magician dominant or if you're a magician warrior and with a relatively less active lover. But what you want to be able to do is be able to tap into that lover in a healthy way, right? So I know dads, for example, that can play with their kids for like 10 straight hours. That's not really my personality, right? Like I would much rather spend time mentoring my kids and teaching them skills or watching a movie with them than like playing Barbies, right? That's a very lover activity, right? And so could I do more of that? Yes, and I've worked on that, but I'm never going to be like some guys who can just do that all day. It's not my personality. So, um, the way that I look at it is you want to look at where you're dysregulated. And so let's say you struggle with procrastination. Well, conquering, achieving, overcoming, getting things done, that's very much a warrior activity. That's the warrior archetype expressing itself. And what might need to be done there is you have some work to do on activating the warrior archetype, right? So you might need to get in your body, do physical challenges. You might need to learn to be more assertive. You might need to even arbitrarily compete just to activate that part of yourself and go, yeah, I remember, like I do have part of me that likes to win, right? That likes to defend what's mine. So you have to activate that archetype. But on the flip side, um, it might also be that you don't spend enough time as the magician, so the warrior doesn't know what to do. He hasn't been given instructions because you haven't taken the time to be introspective, to be strategic, to put a plan together. Because the magician kind of strategizes, creates a vision, and the warrior goes out in the world and makes it happen. So if the magician is not getting his due, the warrior is not going to have proper instructions, and instead of using his capacity to fight and achieve and overcome, he's going to go get in bar fights or yell at his wife, right? And then the other flip side of that is, let's say you have a really underactive lover and all you do is work and compete and challenge and overcome all day, and you don't take that time as the lover to rest and recover, connect with your loved ones, enjoy a good meal, stop and smell the roses. Well, that warrior doesn't have time to come back from battle and recover. So eventually he's just going to quit, or he's going to start drinking, or he's going to start fighting the wrong people. So you really have to look at them as a packaged deal on some level, but I don't think you have to have an equal amount of each. I think you have to harmonize them according to your unique personality.
That's a really beautiful, explanation, thank you. I haven't ever heard it described that way, but I think that when, one of the struggles with talking about polarity work or masculinity or femininity is like, well, we're all individual humans. Like, I'm not going to look like all other women, or Isaac's not going to express the same as all other men. And this gives a little bit of a paradigm for, yeah, of course not. And you have access to similar things as other men have access to. And there's going to be a specific harmony in the way they express within, your soul essence. So, I love that. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think of, whatever, Jocko, right? Who you guys are probably familiar with. Like what works really well for him is waking up and hitting the gym for 2 hours every morning, right? I did that. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. for a year and hit the gym. It did not work for me. Like I'm far better off waking up slowly and taking some time to journal, to pray, to read my Bible, to read some esoteric text that I'm interested in, and move slowly and kind of plan out my day. And then in the evening, go to the gym. And for me, I probably need to go to the gym for 30 to 45 minutes a day. Like that's enough for my warrior to be fully actualized. Um, so when I'm working with my clients, like some of them have to get up and go to the gym for 2 hours every morning to feel good. Some of them need to go for a brisk walk around the block for 15 minutes to feel good. So not everybody has to do the same thing, and it's very tough when you're on social media and you're looking at these guys, and like you can just feel like such a little worm of a man compared to these superhuman, like massively warrior dominant people. But your edge is they're not going to spend 3 hours dissecting Jung in an evening, right? And so you want to develop your weaknesses until they're not holding you back anymore. But I think by and large, you're much better off focusing on your strengths, because I would way rather be a black belt at the things that I love than struggle for the next 10 years to be a blue belt at the things that don't come to me naturally. And I think just on a pure like game theoretical level, you're going to be at a better advantage in in a competitive environment if you get really good at the things you're good at, rather than trying to get to average at the things you're bad at, because being average at something is not a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you is that having access to each archetype is a good thing, is a healthy thing. If you have no access to the warrior, you have no ability to set boundaries or to go after what you want, it's going to be really hard to get things accomplished. If you have no access to the lover, it's going to be really hard for you to experience connection and intimacy with your partner. Um, and it's not about total balance. It's not about being 25 in each category to make 100. And also, like, you're going to turn them up and down as time goes on. Like, if I'm on the basketball court or at the gym, I'm probably going to have more warrior energy than if I'm at home sharing a meal with Jessica.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. And I also think that there's something to be said about transitioning, right? So if you think about that natural progression from the magician kind of strategizes and plans, the warrior goes out and gets it done, and then the lover rests and recover, and then you repeat that cycle. And then over time, the king, that creates the conditions for the king to emerge more powerfully. Even though the king is a separate archetype that needs to be developed, I think you want to give it the right conditions to develop. If you ever, and this might resonate with you, if you've ever tried to go from like being in, strategic planning mode right into connecting with your kids, it can be very difficult because you're trying to go from magician to lover. And what I recommend guys do is, well, if you're in a magician activity, you're, planning and strategizing, let's say, and then you want to go play Barbies with your daughter, it's like, well, go bust out push-ups for 3 minutes first. Like do the magician, then warrior, then lover. Like get that energy out. And once that's out of you, you'll be much better able to actually connect and express the lover archetype. Um, and since we have no awareness of this, and this is something I've kind of put together, so I'm sure other people have come to the same conclusion, but going through that cycle is really important. And so, yeah, if you want to really connect, if I want to really connect with Whitney, Um, and I've just been planning out my content for the next month, I'll always like go do some air squats or some push-ups or go to the gym. Like ideally I go to the gym for an hour, because if I go to the gym for an hour before we go on a date, I can be fully in lover mode. But if I've been sitting at my desk planning all day and I've got all this pent up warrior energy, and then I go try to, talk to Whitney about how the kids are doing, it's like my brain's somewhere else. So moving through that cycle in a healthy way, according to your personality, is really important. It's also important to recognize that although the archetypes reside in us and we can express them, like that is not who we are, right? I am not the magician. I am not the king. I'm not the warrior. I'm not the lover. I'm Matt Enns. And a lot of spiritual work focuses on kind of, diminishing or pushing the ego out of the way. And I think what you really want to do is you actually want to have a very well developed ego. You want to have it in check, but you want to be very conscious of your ego and have a very strong identity within the ego, because it's the ego that mediates the energy of the archetype. So if you don't have a strong ego and you start really doing well at work, let's say, all of a sudden you're like, no, I am the king. And then that becomes inflated and you collapse. You think of like Conor McGregor, right? Like when he was on his ascent in the UFC, he ceased to be Conor McGregor expressing the warrior archetype, and he said, no, I am the warrior. I'm undefeatable. Nothing can touch me. I'm more powerful than everything. And that's way too much psychic energy for one individual man to handle, and it always ends up in a collapse of some kind. And so you want to be very conscious, like I am able to consciously reach out to these archetypes and channel them in a healthy way, but I am not those things. I can move those things through me and connect with them, but I am not the king. I am not the lover, because that's again too much psychic energy for an ego to hold. So you have to know who you are when you're doing this and be conscious of it.
Yeah, that is such an important teaching. It's interesting to watch people on their spiritual evolution or just their human evolution, because we seem to forget that, I call it Earth School, but it's like, yes, we're all one and we can be tapped into these energies. But on Earth School, I'm playing the game of being Jessica. That is an important piece. I can't just forget that that's part of the game that I'm playing. If I forget that that's the game that I'm playing, then I lose tethers to Earth itself. And so that is a really, really important piece of this. And while we're talking about archetypes, I'm thinking about just how you mentioned earlier, Isaac, the trick that the popularity of regulation is playing on everyone right now. Like, it's not about always being calm. True regulation is having agility to move in between all of your emotional states. And I'm thinking the same thing for these archetypes. It's like we don't necessarily want to be in one all of the time. We want to have the agility to move through all of them, or to call upon these parts of ourselves as we need them. And this is a really helpful conversation, actually, I think, for partners to listen to as well, because even the way you're explaining it, of needing to transition between the archetypes to be able to be in connection, is really important. Like, we go to the gym together sometimes, and I'm like, okay, there's certain places that you can express your aggression that I know is not part of our lovership, and the gym's one of them. And then even still, when we go to the gym, we'll do like a really intense cardio workout, and afterwards he's in that energy, and I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, sorry, you're like in that energy. I forgot. Like, this isn't about me, but even having the understanding of it's different gears that the men are in our life when they are becoming masters of their work versus when they are becoming masters of their warrior or their body, versus when they're actually being like a master of our connection. And understanding that there is a gear shift that needs to happen, I think, is important for the partners as well. So that's not
Yeah,
something you're taking
that's so
personally.
well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Whitney is so amazing at this. Like, she'll see me when I'm dealing with something stressful, and I've had to learn, because when I first started doing this work, I was like, well, the height of masculinity is no matter what's going on, you put your hand on your chest and you take 3 deep breaths and you go, well, let's just co-regulate our nervous systems, and it's like, no, sometimes in business it's like, stop fucking doing that. Stop fucking doing that. Right. And when I'm in that energy, Whitney is so amazing. Like, I won't even know I'm in that energy, and she'll like see that and she'll be like, oh, okay. And she'll like, bring me a bottle of water and a snack and just give me a smile and then just like dip out. Like, and then she's somewhere else, right? And she'll tell me, and she's so wonderful that she'll just be like, hey, your energy right now is like way too much. And right away my ego is like, screw you, you're wrong, you're mean, right? And then I remind myself, because I'm a slow learner, but I do eventually learn, like, hey Matt, you've been through this with Whitney 10,000 times. She's pretty much always right. Okay, all right, I'm gonna take a breath. I'm gonna go do some breath work. I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna go take the dog for a walk, whatever. And then it's like, okay, I get that out, and then I come back and it's like, okay, ready to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just have to be aware, and the 50% of the battle of anything is being aware. So just being aware that, like, okay, I can be these different things, and they're meant for different situations, and they land better or worse in different aspects of a relationship. Yeah, that's half the battle, just acknowledging that.
And you learn those things in relationship too. You know, for us, it's very clear that I'm not supporting her in emotional processes at the gym. It just doesn't work. I'm too
Yeah.
activated.
We've tried.
And then also you know, when I like you said, when I'm in that intense energy, sometimes I don't even know it. I'm just in it. And she'll kind of say the same thing, like, you're really intense right now. And I was like, and I'll be like, really? I thought I said that to you in a really calm voice.
It's endearing, don't worry. It's cute.
Just gonna see how it shows up on the podcast. I thought I said that to you just like this.
Yeah.
She'll imitate me, and it's just like this big, loud energy, and I'm like, that was actually how you experienced me, whether I said it that way or not. So as men, we have to understand that a woman is going to receive our intensity or perceive our intensity to be much greater than we are perceiving it ourselves. And like you said earlier in the podcast, we get to be careful about that.
Mhm. Well, I think that like also goes back to what you were saying about how immediately I'm aware that there's a predator in the room. So it's like the life force that runs through his body is huge compared to the life force that runs through my body, which is also powerful, but just much different, you know? So he'll just say the words like, I'm angry. And I'm like, ugh, my whole body's shaking because I know what anger can be expressed at if it were, not in a form that can move it in a healthy way. So that's a piece of that is just realizing that even if you are saying it in a way that like another man might perceive it as just an expression of something natural, like it just feels so much bigger on our end.
And it's very hard to become aware of that as a guy because, especially like me, I didn't grow up with sisters. Um, and it literally didn't cross my mind that I might be scaring Whitney, in spite of the fact that she told me I was scaring her. Right. All my only thought process when she said I was scaring her is like, well, that's ridiculous. Like, clearly I'm not being scary. And yeah, you really have to pay attention to that because, and having a daughter is such great training for this because you can just see, like, if I get a bit of like annoyance in my voice, you can just see her go like, and just like stiffen up and it's like, oh man, like Matt. And especially I work with guys and I love working with men. And part of the reason I love working with men is I can just be like, yo, you're being a piece of shit. Like, stop it. Stop what you're doing. Take a look at yourself. And I'll bring that energy to Whitney because I'm a guy. I love fixing problems. I've built my business around fixing problems. Um, but I'll go to Whitney and be like, hey, you got to work on this. Like, you got to figure this out like that. And she's like, well, it's just like, it just like collapses her and overwhelms her. And then it makes the last thing on earth she's ever going to do fixing that problem. Because I've just made that problem a source of like really big tension and fear in her body. And so learning how to slow down is so counterintuitive for a man because in most other domains in my life, my intensity and my drive is what leads to success. So it works with my friends. It's what works with my career. It's what worked as a hockey player when I was a kid. And it's exactly what doesn't work with my wife. So trying to unlearn, because all like so many guys that come with this so funny that I work with, they come to me and they're like, hey, um, I'm a reasonable person. I really want to see things from her perspective, but I don't have problems in any other area of my life. At work, things are fine. With my friends, things are fine. The only place I have problems is with her. It's like, well, yeah, because with her is different than with your buddies. With her is different than competing to be at the top of the sales list at the office. It's a very different mode of being, and you're very bad at it. And you don't know that it's a different mode of being. Like, what works over there doesn't work here, not because she's dysfunctional or broken, but because she is different than you are. And yeah, it's very important for men to understand that, because I ask men all the time. I think I first heard this from Alison Armstrong, who I'm sure you guys are familiar with. She's incredible. She asked the crowd she was talking to, and I've asked this to lots of crowds, like, okay, men, like, when's the last time that you were afraid? And the average answer I get, because I ask this to clients all the time, is usually I don't remember, or that time 10 or 20 years ago. 30 of the guys that I've asked, when's the last time you were afraid? And they said, I don't remember. We're in combat in the Middle East, right? Like, I've lost friends, and they're like, I don't remember when the last time I was afraid was. And you ask a crowd of women, and they're all going to say last week, yesterday, this morning, right? And it's so foreign to the way that we think that we do what I used to do with Whitney, was like, well, she tells me I'm afraid. And I go, well, that's obviously ridiculous. Next. And just, that's my whole thought on the matter. Right. So we really have to slow down and be like, hey, they experience us and this encounter very, very differently. And if I want her to feel safe with me, if I want her to be soft with me, if I want her to respect me and love me and treat me like a king, I need to be very, very conscious of where she's at. And it just takes a lot of focus and a lot of patience. Until you learn to do it, then it becomes kind of second nature. Not all the way.
I was thinking earlier in the conversation, actually, when I don't, we think maybe we were talking about anger and you were saying, like, I need a breath and this is important to me and I'll be back. And it's circling back now where it's like, yeah, it doesn't, if you say, "Oh, that's ridiculous that you feel afraid," then there's no solution. It's just like, "Okay, well, we're stuck here." But if you are open to the idea that it's true that something that you're doing is creating fear or lack of safety, then it's actually so easy to find the solution. It's like, "Okay, I just have to how can I help you feel safe? What would help you feel safer? What would help you feel more loved?" And then to your point of men like solving problems, it's like now I just have to do exactly what you're telling me to do to help you feel safer. Oh, I can take the space, but I just need to tell you that I'm coming back in X amount of time. Okay, great. Like everyone feels better in this situation. Oh, you want to know that I'm feeling angry because you want to know my emotional process. You just don't want me to yell at you. Okay, great. Like everyone wins. So it really is this admission that there's something that we're doing that's creating dissonance in the field. Like it actually is something that I'm doing that's making the person that I love the most feel not good. And then that's great because now there's something that I can do to help them feel better.
Yeah, very, very well said. And one of the first, like the first module in my coursework, one of the videos is explains how your wife is afraid of you when you're angry, basically. And whether I'm explaining that to guy on a call or he watched the video and we're talking about it afterwards, they're almost like traumatized when they realize it. Because they're like, I spent, my whole marriage trying to make sure she felt safe around me, and that, I would protect her from anything, and I would lay down my life for her. And I thought that was obvious. And like, now realizing, like, I've been making her afraid, like, a lot and often. And they'll say one of two things. They'll say it was like a gut punch, or I felt sick to my stomach. They're like, I felt sick to my stomach when I watched that, because like I never knew, like, and it just doesn't occur to us. But as soon as you're aware of it, like, it's so painful to think, like, wait, I made her afraid. Like, I've directed my whole life to trying to make her feel safe, and without realizing it, she's afraid in her house. I tell the story. Whitney and I got in a fight years ago, and I didn't know anything back then, so she got afraid and she went up to the bedroom, and I was like, "Well, we can't let our son go down. Can't let the sun go down on our anger. Like, that's not healthy." And so I went up there and she wouldn't let me in, and I was knocking, and then I like picked the lock and came in the room, and I thought, because I'm an idiot, I'm like, she's gonna think that's pretty cool that like I know how to pick locks, right? And instead what I was doing is, like, she was so afraid she locked the door to get away from me, and I'm like, no, bitch, you're not safe anywhere in this house. Like, I will find you. But again, like no malintent. I didn't know, right? And when you know that, and you just take a second, you're like, oh wait, her body language is a little bit stiffer. she's not like her voice is a little constricted. It's like, oh wait, hey baby, am I like making you feel uneasy right now? It's like, well, obviously we're like alone in the car. There's no other cars around. We're on this like country road. I'm like, oh, and then like right away, it's like I get hit by this like wave of like, oh, like what am I doing? And then that's usually enough to like counteract the anger and just be like, oh, like that's not what I want, and it brings me right back down. So just checking in and just be like, hey, are you afraid? Like it's okay to ask that, and she might say no because she's too afraid to admit it. Um, but even just becoming aware of it like that and reading her body language, like, oh shit, like can't believe I did that again, right? And I tell guys like, hey, make yourself small. Like if she's sitting on the couch, sit on the floor beside her. Like don't do what men naturally do, which is like, well, I'm amped up, so I'm gonna loom over you and talk to you because again, just lack of awareness, right? But if you can become aware of that, like man, does the relationship get better very quickly.
We're gonna start to wrap this up. But when you were sharing, when you ask men that question, when was the last time you were afraid? And they say, I don't remember, or 10 years ago. Men are afraid just as much as women. We're just so disconnected from that feeling, like that physical response that you just said of, I'm going to loom over you, I'm going to make myself bigger, is a fear response. I'm afraid I'm going to lose your love. I'm afraid I'm going to lose connection. I'm afraid it's going to all fall apart. And so that fear within a man, we started this conversation talking about the first step to the kingdom is getting real with the ways that you're deceiving yourself. And one of those ways is, I'm never afraid. What's your biggest fear? I don't know. I was afraid of clowns when I was 10. It's like,
Yeah.
really, what is it? Is it losing her? Is it not living up to the man that you always thought you were going to be? That's definitely one of the biggest deceptions that guys have is I'm not afraid. I was at a event a couple weeks ago, and it was a pretty mild event as far as men's work goes. And one of the guys was like, I was like, how do you feel? He's like, I feel afraid. And he's like, I've never said that in my life. Like, how does it feel? He's like, oh, feels great.
Mm,
Feels like such a load off my back.
mm.
And to know that, hey, you're no less of a man for feeling fear.
I think it's important to, like, highlight that the fears are different. It's like, I think that women, at least in my experience, I know that women are much better at feeling the emotional fears. It's harder for you to even not you, but just men in general to admit that they have emotional fears, like, it is actually terrifying to think that she would leave or that I wouldn't live up to whatever, and then the fears that the reason it's so easy for women to answer that question is because I'm like, I had to call you the other day to come walk me in from outside because I was nervous about someone sitting in a car. Like I felt physically afraid. And because we're in our human forms, it's so much easier to highlight when we are feeling physically in danger. It's so much more complicated to highlight when I'm feeling an emotional fear, especially for men when your brains are so attached to like logic and math and it's like this doesn't make sense that I'm feeling this in my body, like it's an emotion, what is even that, an emotional fear, so it's a really powerful to highlight that men also have fears and they're much less tangible, which is probably why they're so hard to name.
And you do like part of being a man is you have to act in spite of what you're feeling. And it's very, very important that you have that ability. But most of us develop only that ability and in an unhealthy way. And we don't even know what we're feeling. Like I always, one of the first things I ask the guys I'm working with is like, hey, you're going through a lot. Like, how does this feel? And their answer is almost always, well, I'm annoyed. Is annoyed, angry, pissed off, or annoyed, angry, pissed off, and one other word that means the same thing. And I'm like, okay, well, anger is a cover up emotion. Like, what are you feeling underneath the anger? And then they'll say, well, I don't know, like crappy. And then, you spend 15 minutes extracting this out of them. And then by the end of it, like, oh, I'm feeling like worthless and abandoned and dejected. And like, I'm never going to be loved again. It's like, there we go. Right. But most guys have never really taken the time to be like, what am I actually feeling beyond annoyed? Right. Because it's way easier to feel annoyed than it is to feel abandoned. Right. It's way easier to feel annoyed than it is to feel like you're not the man you thought you might be by 35 or whatever age you are. And learning to be in touch with that is so important on every level, like as an individual, for your marriage, everything. Again, it's like if you're not conscious of that, it's still going to direct your life. You're just going to think it's fate. You're losing control. Most men think that by not feeling they're gaining control over their life. Like, no, I'm in control. It's like, no. You're just unaware of the effect that your emotions are having on your life, but your emotions are very much in control. And it's not until you become conscious of them that you can actually start to move towards having more sovereignty in your life.
Mhm. Yeah, what I've noticed about men as well is because they are averse to feeling those less comfortable emotions. It's like when they feel the frustration or the anger or those more intense, like steam coming out of my head emotions, if they're doing well, they have workouts to mitigate some of that emotion, but then the workout moves enough of the energy that they're like, "Oh, okay. I'm good. Like, everything's fine. I'm fine, I swear." And that's really not the end of the road. It's like, okay, the workout is to help you soften the energy enough so that you can explore the stuff that's underneath, so that you can have the actual repair conversation with someone or the journaling experience with yourself that maybe you can't have when you have so much energy in your body you want to punch a wall. So I think that that's an important highlight, because for the feminine side, we naturally want to go all the way to the bottom of something. Obviously, there's women who avoid their emotions, but once we start, we can feel that something isn't right, and until it's fully cleared, we can't stop feeling it. But for men, because so much is more of this like outward energy and this anger and frustration, and we haven't learned emotional skills, it seems that if the energy is mitigated just enough, then it's very easy to say, okay, everything's fine. Like, I did it. I did the thing. I regulated my emotions by going to the gym, which is great, but then it's not the end.
That's so true, because I talk to guys all the time. I'm like, hey, like, your life is falling apart right now. Your wife's with some other guy. You're not, there's a restraining order that she filed falsely against you, and you can't see your kids, whatever. It's like, how you doing? Oh, well, it was a bit of a rough morning, but I went to the gym and I'm doing great now. Like, mm, you should not be doing great. Your life is falling apart.
Mhm.
Like, you should actually be feeling bad about this. Like, can we find where, and it's always there, right? So yeah, the gym is a very healthy way to, what you should use the gym for is to make sure your emotions are not controlling your behavior, but you should not use the gym to get rid of emotions, right? You should still be after the gym, be able to go, okay, I clear my head a little bit. The emotions aren't trying to take me over anymore. Okay, let's feel this sadness. Let's feel this panic at what life might look like if I don't get to see my kids again, if I lose the woman I love, if my friends and family and coworkers think I'm an abuser. Like, that's not something you can get rid of on the treadmill for 45 minutes, right? It just doesn't work that way. You have to actually take the time to process it. And so, yeah, like everything in life, it's that balance, right? It's like, can you find the golden center? And I don't think we ever truly do, but you can get closer over time.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and this way that we are re-understanding the gym in this conversation, it also connects to the cold plunge. I'm just gonna do 5 minutes in the cold tub and everything will be all right. Like, no, that'll just create a little bit more space for you to have the conversation or whatever it is. Or breath work, or I'm just gonna drink 2 cups of coffee and then I'll be good. It's like that coffee one might not even make it easier for you to like face the emotion with what you need.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, let's just like let me just pop a bunch of like adaptogens. It's like, no, no, dude. Um, so we have a tradition on this podcast in an effort to actually change lives is that each guest will leave a homework assignment for men that they can do and experience change or a new perspective or a new way of being. So if you were to prescribe one simple homework assignment that every guy listening to this can do, what would it be?
Well, we talked about some of them already. So what I would say is this, aside from all the other things I said, do all of those. But what I would say is write down your origin story. We've all seen Batman Begins, right? That's how Bruce Wayne became Batman, right? What is your origin story? Right? How did you become the man you are today? And start with your earliest memories and work through every memory of significance that turned you into the man you are today, because that's one of the first things you can do to make the unconscious conscious. Is when you do that, you look back and you'll go, oh, like this event that happened with my friends when I was 12, like I'm still playing that out with my wife right now. And oh yeah, like I never realized that my dad never actually gave me advice. Like, holy crap, like I went through that when I was 15 alone, and like nobody even told me what to do about it. And just being able to kind of connect the dots like that will help you understand yourself so much better, figure out what you need to work on, and figure out who you could be, because you're kind of figuring out, becoming the man you're meant to be is this simultaneous process of discovery and design, right? You want to design that man, but it's based on discovering who you already are. And that origin story is a great way to do it. So write it like a story that would be interesting for somebody to read. Don't worry about grammar and prose and everything, but make it a little bit dramatic. Don't just like write a bullet point list of facts, right? Write a story like, Matt was born in this part of town, and here's the early experiences, and this was really hard for him, and this was a really big victory, and this really wiped him out for a while. Write a story, and you'll understand yourself so much better, and you'll be a much more powerful man if you can understand yourself on that level.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And then the second question that we always ask our guests at the end is part of the intention of this podcast is to, elevate the voices of men who are really showing up well so that more men can have the blueprint and we can start sharing the story that there are plenty of good men in the world, actually. We just aren't hearing them because they're busy doing other stuff. And so, if there were some men that you could direct some of our listeners to, who's a man or two that you would recommend them also look to?
Yeah. Um, I'll give you a few options. So on like a reading books level, um, King Warrior Magician Lover by Douglas Gillette and Robert Moore is essential reading. So is Way of the Superior Man by David Dida, and so is Iron John by Robert Bly. Um, on like an influencer level, Dwayne from Dry Creek Ranch on YouTube. He's like an old cowboy sharing just really grounded, down to earth, balanced masculinity. Not the, Bugattis and six pack on the one side, or the prayer beads and endless ayahuasca on the other side, right? Like that really grounded, centered what it is to be a man. And then on a personal level, a friend of mine, Alex Jelsic, he's just a really good example of what it is to be somebody who has a very deep, serious, personal, spiritual practice, but is also a regular dude with a family, who's not, got his head in the clouds all day. He's a very, very grounded, wise, yeah, example of what it is to be a man. So those would be my list off the top of my head.
Thanks for those, Matt. And as we wrap up, we'll pop these in the show notes, but where can the people find you?
On most platforms, I'm at _sovereign_man. And if you can't find me, just search Matt Enns, the Sovereign Man. But Instagram is where I'm most active.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank
And one
you.
more thing I should add.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
I also wrote a book recently, which I never remember to promote. So
Great.
you can also find me on Amazon. Divorce Proof Man. So this is of the 500 plus men I've worked with to save their marriages. These are the 9 ideas that I have found actually moves the needle the most for men, to just by reading a book to go, oh, okay, that I can do. Oh, that's why she's doing this. So that's why this always falls off the rails. I teach hundreds and hundreds of concepts in my program. These are the 9 that work the fastest to change your marriage. And none of it is based on theory. All of it is based on things that actually work with men from every walk of life very reliably every single time. So yeah, buy my
Awesome.
book.
And is that for men whose only for men whose marriage is on the rocks, or is it also for those wise and humble men that want to create a foundation of real security for their marriage before?
I decided to market it to a niche. So it's marketed at men who are on the verge of divorce. Almost everybody who buys it ends up buying a copy for somebody they know that's about to get married, or somebody who's newly married. So yeah, if your marriage is amazing, or you're about to get married, or you want to get married one day, it's basically the 9 things men need to understand about women to actually be married to them successfully at some point. So it's 100% useful for everybody.
Awesome. Well, congrats on the book, Matt. And thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.